David Sutton's world is shattered when his twin daughters are kidnapped without a trace. 8 years later, a shocking news report leads him to two adopted girls who bear an uncanny resemblance to his missing children. As David and the girls' adoptive mother, Anna Simmons, dig deeper, a web of secrets, betrayal, and revenge begins to unravel. David Sutton sat in his expansive office, the floor-to-ceiling windows showcasing a sprawling skyline of high-end hotels, all a testament to his empire. Yet, despite his immense success, the hollow ache inside him never dulled. For 8 long years, David had been haunted by one single event that shattered his world: the kidnapping of his twin daughters, Madison and Maya. It was a quiet autumn night, 8 years ago. David had been returning from a late-night business meeting when he received the call that changed everything. His luxurious home, nestled in a private estate, had been breached. His security team subdued. His twin girls, only 4 years old at the time, were gone. The shock, the terror, and then the guilt consumed him. For days, weeks, and months after, David barely functioned. His ex-wife, consumed by her own grief, eventually moved away, unable to bear the emptiness of the home without their daughters. But David? He couldn't give up. He buried himself in his work, using his growing wealth to fund an extensive search for his missing daughters. Private investigators, international law enforcement agencies, even media campaigns, David had tried everything. He poured millions into the search, each dead-end lead stabbing deeper into his already fragile heart. The frustration gnawed at him, driving him to become more distant from those around him. Friends, family, even colleagues noticed his emotional withdrawal. But none of it mattered to David. His entire focus was on finding Madison and Maya. He barely left his office these days, delegating the management of his hotel empire to his trusted executives. His once grand social life faded into oblivion. People wondered how a man so powerful could still seem so broken. The public assumed David was driven purely by ambition and wealth, but only a select few knew the truth. His heart, his drive, was not tied to luxury or success. It was tied to his missing daughters. As David scanned the digital files his private investigator had sent him earlier that morning, his phone buzzed. His personal assistant knocked softly on the door, poking her head inside with a tentative look. "Mr. Sutton, there's a news report I think you should see. It might be important," she said, her voice soft but urgent. David, who had long given up on such news, glanced up wearily. "Another false lead?" She hesitated. "It's about a local school, and there's a pair of twin girls who—" The mention of twins was all it took to spark his interest. He pushed his chair back, eyes narrowing. "Put it on." She quickly switched the TV to the local news. David's heart pounded as the screen showed footage of two young girls standing on a stage, receiving awards for a national math competition. The girls, bright, confident, and identical, were holding their trophies, beaming for the cameras. David leaned forward, eyes wide, his heart thudding in his chest. There was something about them, something so familiar. They looked just like Madison and Maya. The reporter's voice narrated, "These brilliant young minds, Olivia and Grace, have stunned educators across the country with their remarkable performance in this year's prestigious competition." David's mind raced. Could it be? He had seen so many false hopes before, but these girls, there was no denying it. They looked exactly like how he imagined his daughters would look today. "Where is this?" he asked, his voice tight with a sudden surge of hope. His assistant checked the details. "It's a local school, sir. The girls were adopted. There's not much information available about their birth parents." David's heart skipped a beat. Adopted. It was the first clue in years that felt right. He had to know more. Without hesitation, David grabbed his phone and dialed his lead private investigator. "I want everything you can find on two girls named Olivia and Grace. Start now." The search for his daughters had taken a new turn. David's pulse raced as the old pain mixed with a new, dangerous hope. Could it really be them? As the screen faded back to the regular news, David sat in his chair, his mind already plotting his next move. This time, it felt different. This time, it felt real. Anna Simmons sat at her kitchen table, the warm glow of the morning sun filtering through the curtains. In front of her, Olivia and Grace, her adopted twin daughters, were quietly working on their homework. The house was peaceful, but Anna couldn't shake the nagging worry gnawing at the back of her mind. The latest letter from the school lay open in front of her. It was both exciting and terrifying at the same time. Olivia's incredible success in the national math competition had caught the attention of not just the local media, but also prestigious academic institutions. Grace, while equally brilliant in her own right, had focused her talents more on the arts, balancing their household dynamic. Both girls, now 12 years old, were growing up faster than Anna could keep up with. She had always known they were special from the day she adopted them. Abandoned at a young age with no record of their biological family, the twins had come into Anna's life when they were just 5. It had been a whirlwind. Anna, a single schoolteacher, suddenly finding herself a mother to 2 children. But she couldn't imagine her life without them now. They were her world. But today, she was worried. The letters from private academies offering scholarships and advanced programs for Olivia were flattering, but how could she afford everything else that came with it? Trips, supplies, transportation. All things that Anna's modest salary couldn't cover. Grace, too, deserved the best opportunities for her artistic talent. How was she supposed to support both? As these thoughts circled in her mind, Olivia looked up from her homework. "Mom, do you think I'll be able to go to that school if they accept me?" Her bright eyes were full of hope, and Anna's heart squeezed. Anna forced a smile. "We'll find a way, sweetie. Don't worry about that right now." Olivia seemed satisfied with that answer and went back to her work, but Anna knew she couldn't keep dodging the financial reality forever. Later that afternoon, as Anna washed the dishes and watched the girls playing in the backyard, her phone buzzed on the counter. It was an unknown number. Normally, she wouldn't have answered, but something told her to pick up this call. "Hello," she said, pressing the phone to her ear. "Ms. Simmons?" The man's voice was deep, calm, but there was something in the tone that made Anna's stomach tighten. "My name is David Sutton." Anna frowned, the name ringing a vague bell. "Yes, this is Anna. How can I help you?" There was a pause on the other end. "This may sound strange, but I recently came across a news story about your daughters, Olivia and Grace. I believe there's a possibility they might be my missing children." Anna froze, her grip tightening around the dish towel in her hand. I'm sorry, what?" Her voice trembled slightly. "My twin daughters, Madison and Maya, were kidnapped 8 years ago," David continued, his voice more deliberate now. "I've been searching for them ever since. When I saw your daughters on the news, their resemblance to my girls was undeniable. I've done some preliminary research, and I understand they were adopted. I would like to meet with you to discuss this further." Anna's mind was spinning. This couldn't be real. It had to be some kind of mistake. But she knew enough about David Sutton to know that he wasn't some random person off the street. His name was well known, not just in business circles, but because of the tragic story of his daughter's kidnapping. She took a deep breath, trying to calm herself. "Mr. Sutton, I don't know what to say. Olivia and Grace are my daughters. I've raised them for the last 7 years. I don't know anything about their birth family. The adoption records were sealed and—" "I understand this is overwhelming, Miss Simmons," David interrupted gently. "I'm not trying to take anything away from you. I just want to know if there's a possibility they might be my girls. If I'm wrong, I will step back. But if there's even a chance, I need to know." Anna felt the weight of the situation pressing down on her. She glanced out the window again, watching as Olivia and Grace ran around, laughing and free. The thought of them being someone else's children, of her losing them, made her feel sick. I don't know," Anna whispered, more to herself than to David. "Please," David said, his voice softening. "Just a meeting. We can talk, and if you're open to it, a simple DNA test could give us clarity." Anna hesitated. The last thing she wanted was to disrupt her daughters' lives, but she couldn't deny the possibility that David might be telling the truth. What if Olivia and Grace weren't hers after all? What if they really were Madison and Maya? Finally, after what felt like an eternity, Anna spoke. "All right, we can meet, but I want to be clear. Olivia and Grace are my daughters. No matter what." "I understand," David replied, his tone firm but respectful. "Thank you. I'll have my assistant arrange a time and place that works for you." After the call ended, Anna stood in the kitchen, gripping the counter as she tried to process what had just happened. Was she about to lose everything? Could her life with the girls, the family she had built, be torn apart by a truth she wasn't ready to face? That night, after the girls had gone to bed, Anna sat alone in the quiet house, staring at old photos of Olivia and Grace. They were smiling, happy, oblivious to the storm that might be headed their way. Tears welled up in her eyes as fear crept into her heart. The next few days would determine everything, and Anna wasn't sure she was ready for the answers she might get. David Sutton's hands trembled slightly as he sat at the corner table of a quiet cafe, waiting for Anna Simmons to arrive. His mind raced as he rehearsed how he would explain everything to her. The possibility that he had found his daughters after 8 long years was almost too much to comprehend. And yet, he had to remain calm. This was not just about him. Anna had raised these girls as her own, and whatever the truth was, she deserved respect and sensitivity. He glanced at his watch for the 10th time, willing himself to remain patient. Just as his mind started to spiral into anxiety, the door to the cafe opened, and a woman walked in, nervous but composed. She scanned the room, and when their eyes met, she hesitated before approaching. It was Anna Simmons. David stood as she neared the table. "Miss Simmons?" he asked, his voice steadier than he felt. "Mr. Sutton," she replied with a tight smile, extending her hand. "Thank you for meeting me." "Thank you for coming," David said, gesturing for her to sit. "I know this isn't easy." Anna sat down, clutching her purse as though it were the only thing grounding her. She was nervous, and understandably so. She looked at David carefully, as if trying to decipher his intentions. David, on the other hand, was studying her, trying to see if he could find traces of his daughters in the woman who had raised them. After a long, awkward silence, Anna finally spoke. "I'm still not sure how to feel about all this. I don't even know where to begin." David took a deep breath. "I understand. This is unimaginable. Believe me, if I didn't think there was a real possibility that Olivia and Grace could be my daughters, I wouldn't be here. I don't want to cause any more pain than what has already been suffered." Anna nodded slowly, but her face was filled with doubt. "You said they were kidnapped?" David's face darkened, the old wound opening once again. "Yes. It was 8 years ago. There was a break-in at our home, and Madison and Maya were taken in the middle of the night. We searched everywhere, hired investigators, worked with the police, but every lead turned into a dead end. I've never stopped looking, though." Anna watched him closely, hearing the pain in his voice, but also feeling the rising fear that his story might be true. "But Olivia and Grace, I found them when they were 5, abandoned, with no history of who their parents were. The adoption agency didn't have any information about their past, other than the fact that they were placed into the system anonymously." David leaned in, his eyes filled with urgency. "I've looked into it. The timeline fits. The age, the fact that they're twins. I saw them on the news, and they look just like Madison and Maya would today." Anna swallowed hard. "They've been through so much already. I don't want them to be hurt again." "I understand," David said gently. "But if they are my daughters, I need to know. You have my word, Miss Simmons. I'm not here to take them away from you. But I do need to find out the truth." The sincerity in David's voice made Anna pause. She had come here defensive, ready to fight to protect the girls she had raised, but hearing the desperation in his voice, the raw emotion behind his words, chipped away at the wall she had built. "What do you propose we do?" Anna asked quietly. "A DNA test," David answered immediately. "It's the only way we can be sure. If the test shows that Olivia and Grace are not Madison and Maya, then I will walk away, and you'll never hear from me again. But if the results show that they are my daughters," his voice faltered, and he looked away, regaining his composure, "then we'll need to have a different conversation." Anna's hands tightened around her purse again. The thought of a DNA test terrified her. What if it proved that Olivia and Grace weren't hers? That they had a past, another family, that she had no part of? She didn't want to lose them. They were her daughters in every way that mattered. But deep down, she also knew that this was something she couldn't avoid. She had to know the truth, for their sake as much as her own. "I'll agree to the test," Anna said finally, her voice steady but soft. "But only if we keep this between us until we know for sure. I don't want the girls getting confused or scared if it turns out that this is all a mistake." David nodded. "Agreed. I don't want to disrupt their lives unnecessarily either." They sat in silence for a moment, the weight of what they had just agreed to settling over them. "There's something else," Anna said after a long pause. "Olivia, she's been having these memories. Little things, flashes of a different life. I didn't think much of it at first. I thought maybe it was just her imagination. But lately, she's been talking about a house, a big house with a garden, and..." Anna hesitated, her voice catching. "She said she remembers seeing a man who looks like you." David's breath caught in his throat. He had imagined 1,000 different ways this conversation could go, but hearing that one of the girls might remember him was almost too much to hope for. "I've heard of cases where children, even those taken very young, retain fragments of their past," he said quietly, his heart racing. "It's possible she's remembering our home." Anna shook her head, struggling to keep her emotions in check. "I don't know what to think anymore. I just want to do what's best for them." David reached across the table, his eyes filled with sincerity. "So do I, Anna. I promise you that's all I want." The following week, the DNA test was arranged discreetly, without the knowledge of Olivia and Grace. Anna and David met again briefly at the clinic, exchanging few words. The tension between them was thick, the stakes higher than either of them had ever imagined. The test itself was quick, swabs taken from both Olivia and Grace when they weren't paying attention, during an ordinary checkup at the doctor's office. Anna tried to act normal, but the wait for the results hung over her like a cloud. For David, the wait was excruciating. Every day, he checked his phone obsessively, hoping for the call that could either bring him the closure he had been searching for or crush his hopes once again. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the call came. "Mr. Sutton," the voice on the other end said, "the results are in. The twins, Olivia and Grace. They are your daughters." David's world tilted on its axis. His breath caught, his hands shaking as he sat down heavily in his chair. Madison and Maya. They were alive. He had found them. As the weight of the revelation crashed over him, he realized that the hardest part was still ahead. How would he explain this to Anna? How would they break the news to the girls? And most importantly, what would happen next? Anna stood frozen in her living room, staring at the phone in her hand. David Sutton's voice echoed in her mind. "They are my daughters." The words hit her like a tidal wave, drowning her in a whirlpool of confusion and fear. She couldn't move, couldn't think clearly. The truth she had dreaded was now real, and everything she knew about her life with Olivia and Grace was about to change. Her heart ached as she thought about the girls upstairs, unaware of the storm brewing beneath their peaceful world. Olivia, with her sharp mind and curiosity, always eager to explore new challenges. Grace, the quiet artist, who poured her feelings into her drawings. How could she look at them now, knowing that they weren't just her daughters, but someone else's? What would happen to the family they had built together? The phone buzzed again, snapping Anna out of her thoughts. It was David. She knew she had to answer, but the weight of the conversation that awaited her made her hesitate. Finally, with a deep breath, she picked up. "Anna," David's voice was gentle but strained. "I know this is a lot to take in. Believe me, I'm just as overwhelmed as you are." Anna pressed her fingers to her temple, trying to ease the tension building there. "What are we supposed to do now?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. David paused on the other end. "I don't have all the answers," he admitted, "but we need to figure this out together, for the girls' sake." Anna's hand trembled as she set the phone down on the kitchen counter and leaned against it. "They don't know, David. They don't remember their past, not really. Olivia has some memories, but Grace, I don't think she remembers anything. I don't know how to tell them this." David sighed heavily. "We can't keep it from them forever, Anna. They have a right to know the truth about who they are." "I'm scared," Anna whispered. "What if they don't want me anymore? What if they feel like I lied to them?" "You didn't lie," David said firmly. "You gave them a home when they had no one else. You've been their mother in every way that matters. Nothing changes that." But deep down, Anna wasn't sure she believed him. Everything had changed now. She could feel the ground shifting beneath her feet, and no matter how much David tried to reassure her, she knew this was the beginning of a complicated, painful journey. The following weekend, Anna agreed to meet David again, this time at his home. She had resisted the idea at first, afraid of what seeing his life might mean for her and the girls, but she knew it was a necessary step. If they were going to move forward, she needed to understand the world David came from and what kind of future he envisioned for Madison and Maya. When she pulled up to David's estate, the grandeur of the place struck her immediately. The house was enormous, a sprawling mansion set back from the road, surrounded by meticulously manicured gardens. It was the kind of home that screamed wealth and privilege, worlds away from the modest life Anna had built with Olivia and Grace. David met her at the door, looking tense but determined. "Thank you for coming," he said quietly, stepping aside to let her in. Anna nodded stiffly, still feeling like a stranger in this situation that had somehow become her reality. As she walked into the grand foyer, her eyes were drawn to the framed photos lining the walls. David and his daughters, Madison and Maya, smiling, carefree, before their world was torn apart. David caught her staring and walked over to one of the pictures. "That was their 4th birthday," he said softly, his fingers tracing the outline of the frame. "They loved that garden. We had a big party, and they spent the entire afternoon running around, laughing." Anna swallowed hard, the image of the twins in the photo blurring with the faces of the girls she had raised. The memories David described were so far removed from the life Olivia and Grace knew now. How would they even begin to reconcile these two realities? David gestured for Anna to follow him into a sitting room, where they sat opposite each other, the tension between them palpable. He poured them both a glass of water, though neither of them drank it. "I've been thinking about how we handle this," David began. "I don't want to rush into anything. We need to go slow, let the girls process things in their own time. But they need to know the truth." Anna nodded, though the knot in her stomach tightened. "We can't just drop this on them all at once. It would be too much. They're just kids. They've only known me as their mother, and I'm not here to take that away from you," David said quickly, sensing her fear. "I know this is complicated, but I want to be a part of their lives. I want them to know where they came from." Anna looked at him, her eyes filled with uncertainty. "I've raised them for 7 years, David. We're a family. What if they don't want to be part of your world? What if they're happy with the life we've built?" David hesitated, his brow furrowing. "Then I'll respect that. But we owe it to them to give them the choice." The enormity of what lay ahead weighed heavily on both of them. It wasn't just about a reunion. It was about bridging two completely different worlds and finding a way to give Olivia and Grace, Madison and Maya, the space to understand who they were. "We need to tell them together," David said finally. "It has to come from both of us." Anna felt a lump rise in her throat. The thought of sitting Olivia and Grace down, of explaining that their real names were Madison and Maya, that they had a father who had been searching for them all this time. It seemed impossible. How could they make sense of something so life-altering? But deep down, Anna knew David was right. She couldn't keep this from them forever. The truth, as terrifying as it was, had to come out. "All right," Anna said, her voice barely above a whisper. "We'll tell them together." The day they told the girls was one Anna would never forget. She and David sat nervously in her living room, waiting for Olivia and Grace to come home from school. The air was thick with tension, and Anna's heart raced as she tried to prepare herself for what was about to happen. When the twins finally walked in, laughing and chatting about their day, they immediately sensed something was wrong. Olivia, ever observant, was the first to notice David sitting on the couch. "Mom," she asked, her eyes darting between Anna and David. "What's going on?" Anna's mouth went dry, and for a moment, she couldn't find the words. David, sensing her struggle, leaned forward slightly, his voice calm but serious. "Olivia, Grace, there's something important we need to talk to you about." The girls exchanged confused glances before sitting down across from their mother and David. Olivia's sharp eyes studied David closely, as though trying to place him, while Grace, quieter, stayed close to Anna, her expression more reserved. "Do you remember, Olivia?" Anna began, her voice trembling slightly. "How you told me about those memories you've been having. The big house, the garden." Olivia nodded slowly, her eyes widening as realization crept in. Anna swallowed hard, glancing at David before continuing. "David, he's your father." There was a beat of silence before Grace gasped softly, her face pale as she processed the words. Olivia, on the other hand, sat very still, her mind working rapidly to piece everything together. "We were kidnapped when we were little," David said gently, leaning forward. "You were both very young, and you were taken from me. I've been searching for you ever since." The words hung heavy in the air, and for a long time, neither Olivia nor Grace spoke. Anna watched them, her heart breaking as she saw the confusion and fear in their eyes. Olivia was the first to speak. "So, we're not really Olivia and Grace?" David hesitated. "Your real names are Madison and Maya." The twins exchanged another look, and this time, Grace spoke. "But we're still us, right? Nothing changes that?" Anna reached for Grace's hand, squeezing it tightly. "Of course, you're still Olivia and Grace to me, and you always will be. This doesn't change who you are or the life we've built together." Olivia, ever the pragmatist, turned back to David. "Why now? Why did it take you so long to find us?" David's face was filled with regret. "I searched everywhere. The people who took you, they covered their tracks well. I only found you recently by chance. But now that I have, I want to be a part of your lives again, if you'll let me." Olivia and Grace sat in stunned silence, their minds reeling from the information. The lives they had known, the identities they had built, were suddenly shaken to their core. The following days were a whirlwind of confusion and emotional turmoil for Olivia and Grace. Ever since the truth had been revealed, everything felt different, even though nothing tangible had changed yet. They still lived in the same house with Anna, still went to the same school, and their daily routines continued. But underneath it all, there was a palpable tension as they grappled with the revelation that their identities, Madison and Maya, were not just names from a distant past, but a part of who they had always been. Olivia, with her sharp intellect and logical mind, tried to process it like a puzzle she could solve. She spent hours in her room, going over old photos, thinking about the vague memories that had resurfaced over the past year. Memories of the house with the garden, of a man's voice calling her and Grace by different names. Her curiosity about David grew, but so did her confusion. How was she supposed to reconcile the life she had with Anna, the only mother she had ever known, with the new reality of David Sutton, a father she barely remembered? Grace, on the other hand, withdrew into herself. The usually artistic and expressive girl barely touched her sketchpad, instead retreating into silence. She clung to Anna, needing the comfort of the life she knew, the one that felt safe. But no matter how tightly she held on, she couldn't shake the feeling that everything was slipping away. For Anna, watching her daughters struggle tore her apart. The guilt gnawed at her constantly. Guilt for not knowing, for not being able to protect them from this confusion, for feeling as though she might lose them to the man who was biologically their father. She tried to keep things as normal as possible at home, but the unspoken truth hovered over them like a storm cloud, darkening their once happy household. David, too, was struggling. He had waited so long for this moment, the reunion with his daughters, but it was nothing like he had imagined. He had thought, naively, that finding them would mean instant joy, that they would remember him and embrace him as their father. But the reality was far more complex. They were strangers to him now, and he to them. David visited regularly, slowly introducing himself into Olivia and Grace's lives, careful not to push too hard, though every visit felt like walking on eggshells. The girls were polite but distant, unsure of how to navigate the relationship. Grace barely spoke to him at all, while Olivia would ask questions, her analytical mind trying to piece together this new chapter of their lives. David appreciated her curiosity, but he could sense the wariness behind it, as though she were trying to determine whether he could fit into the life she already had. One evening, during one of these visits, David sat down with Olivia at the dining table, while Grace stayed upstairs, as usual. "Do you remember anything from before?" David asked softly, watching Olivia as she focused on her math homework. He didn't want to push her, but he needed to know. Olivia set her pencil down and looked at him, her expression guarded. I remember bits and pieces. Flashes, mostly. Like our old house. I remember the garden, and I think I remember you. But it's all kind of blurry. David nodded, trying to keep the sadness from showing. That's more than I could have hoped for.
It's enough.
Olivia hesitated, her fingers tracing patterns on the edge of her notebook. Why did they take us? Why did someone kidnap us? Her voice was small, and for the first time, David saw the fear beneath her calm exterior. The question pierced David deeply. He had asked himself that same question for years, but now, looking at his daughter, he knew he had to give her an answer, even if it wasn't one she could fully understand. There was a man who worked for me at one of my hotels. He was angry after I fired him, and I guess he blamed me for everything wrong in his life. He wanted revenge, and taking you and your sister was how he thought he could hurt me the most. David's voice was thick with pain, and for a moment, he struggled to continue. I never imagined it would happen. I thought we were safe. But I failed you both. Olivia looked away, her jaw tightening. So it was your fault? The bluntness of her words struck David hard, and he felt a wave of guilt crash over him. He had asked himself the same thing 1,000 times. Had his actions, his decisions, caused this unimaginable pain for his daughters? He couldn't deny it. Yes, he said quietly. In a way, it was. I didn't protect you the way I should have. And I'll never stop being sorry for that. Olivia didn't respond right away. She was trying to make sense of something too big, too painful. She had always prided herself on being able to figure things out. But this wasn't a math problem with a clear solution. David watched her, the weight of his failure pressing down on him. He had spent years trying to find them, but now that he had, he wondered if the damage was too deep to repair. Meanwhile, upstairs, Grace sat on her bed, curled up with a book she wasn't really reading. Her mind was spinning. She could hear the murmur of voices downstairs, Olivia and David talking, but she didn't want to be part of it. She didn't want to be pulled into this new reality where she wasn't just Grace anymore. She was Madison too, and she didn't know what that meant. Anna knocked softly on her door before entering. "Hey, sweetheart," she said, sitting on the edge of the bed. "How are you feeling?" Grace shrugged, not meeting her mother's eyes. "I don't know. I don't want to talk about it." Anna's heart ached, but she didn't push. Instead, she gently stroked Grace's hair, hoping the quiet comfort would be enough for now. "I know this is hard," Anna said softly, "and I know things feel really confusing right now. But whatever happens, Grace, I'm always going to be here for you. You'll always be my daughter."
That will never change.
Grace looked up at her, her eyes filling with tears. "I don't want things to change," she whispered. "I don't want to be someone else." Anna pulled her into a tight hug, her own tears threatening to spill over. "You're not someone else. You're still you. Whether you're Grace or Madison, you're still my girl." They stayed like that for a long time, Anna holding her daughter close, hoping that the love they had built over the years would be enough to weather this storm. As the weeks passed, the family, David, Anna, Olivia, and Grace, began to establish a delicate balance, though it was far from perfect. David continued to visit, sometimes spending time with the girls together, but often separately, as Olivia seemed more open to him while Grace remained distant. But there was still one major piece of the puzzle that hadn't been resolved. The man who had orchestrated the kidnapping, David's former employee, had never been found. Despite David's efforts, the trail had gone cold years ago, and the police had all but closed the case. But now, with the girls found, there was a renewed sense of urgency to bring the kidnapper to justice. David's private investigator, who had never given up on the case, was following new leads, piecing together information that had gone unnoticed before. And then, one day, the breakthrough came. The man responsible for the kidnapping had been living under a false identity in a small town, far from the reach of law enforcement. He had changed his appearance, his name, and had evaded capture for years. But now, thanks to a tip from an old associate, his location had been uncovered. David received the call late one night, and his heart raced as he listened to the news. The man who had stolen his daughters, who had torn his family apart, was finally going to face justice. The next day, David told Anna about the arrest. "They got him," he said, his voice filled with a mixture of relief and lingering anger. "He's in custody. It's over." Anna nodded, feeling a sense of closure, but also a deep sadness. "Does that mean the girls are going to be okay now?" she asked, her voice fragile. David looked at her, his expression softening. "I don't know," he admitted, "but at least we know the person who did this can't hurt them anymore." As the news of the arrest spread, Olivia and Grace were told about the man who had taken them. Olivia's response was cold, detached, as if she had already processed the worst of it. Grace, on the other hand, was deeply shaken. Knowing that the man who had stolen her from her family was finally behind bars should have brought relief, but instead, it reopened old wounds. For all of them, it was a bittersweet victory. Justice had been served, but the scars remained. Now, they had to begin the slow process of healing, not just as individuals, but as a family. One that spanned two very different worlds. Months had passed since the man responsible for Madison and Maya's kidnapping had been brought to justice, but the emotional aftermath lingered. Olivia and Grace, still adjusting to their true identities as Madison and Maya, struggled to reconcile their past with their present. Though David's presence in their lives had become more familiar, the fragile web of relationships among them was still filled with tension. For Anna, the biggest challenge wasn't just navigating her daughter's complex emotions, but facing her own fears. Every time David came over, every time he shared a moment with the girls, she worried she might lose them. They had always been hers, Olivia and Grace, the girls she had found, loved, and raised. But now, with their biological father back in the picture, her heart constantly whispered a fearful question. What if they choose him over me? One Sunday afternoon, as David sat in the living room with the twins, going over some old photographs from when they were toddlers, Anna busied herself in the kitchen. The smell of freshly baked cookies wafted through the air, a comforting scent she hoped would ease the growing anxiety she felt about the future. She could hear David talking to the girls, his voice gentle, filled with memories she wasn't part of. "I remember you both loved swinging in the backyard," David said, pointing at a picture. "You used to run toward the garden, laughing at the top of your lungs." Olivia, or Madison as she was now being called more often, studied the picture. There was a trace of recognition in her eyes, but also something else, sadness. "I feel like I should remember more," she said quietly, her voice tinged with frustration. Grace, still preferring to go by her adopted name, shifted uncomfortably beside her sister. She rarely spoke when David was around, her reluctance to accept the past still palpable. "It's hard to think of all of that as real," she whispered. David smiled softly. "It's okay. We'll take it one step at a time. I don't expect you to remember everything. I'm just happy to be here with you now." Grace didn't reply. Instead, she stood up abruptly and went to the window, staring out at the street. Olivia watched her for a moment before turning back to David, her expression conflicted. "I still don't know where we fit," she said after a long pause. "Everything feels torn." David's face fell slightly, though he tried to hide it. "I know it's complicated," he admitted, "but you don't have to choose between me and your mom. There's room for both of us in your lives." Olivia glanced over at Grace again, her thoughts clearly elsewhere. "I guess. Just feels weird." Before David could respond, Anna stepped into the room, wiping her hands on a towel, her heart heavy. She could sense the tension, the uncertainty that lingered between them all. "Cookies are ready if anyone's hungry," she said, her voice cheerful, but her smile didn't reach her eyes. Grace turned around, her face brightening slightly. "Thanks, Mom," she said, walking over to the kitchen to grab one. David rose from the couch and followed, the easy rhythm of family life still awkward for him. He was trying, and Anna appreciated that. But it was clear that this delicate balance they had found wasn't stable yet. After the girls had retreated upstairs, leaving Anna and David alone in the kitchen, the weight of everything that had happened over the past few months hung between them. David broke the silence first. "They're still struggling, aren't they?" he said quietly, leaning against the counter. Anna sighed, nodding. "It's not easy for them. They've built a whole life here, and now everything feels uncertain." And honestly, she hesitated, her eyes meeting his. "It's not easy for me either." David's face softened with understanding. "I know this has been hard on you. I can't imagine what it's been like, raising them on your own, only to have me come back into the picture and throw everything off balance." Anna shook her head, her voice trembling slightly. "You didn't throw everything off balance, David. It's just, I'm scared. I love them so much, and I don't want to lose them." David took a step closer, his expression sincere. "Anna, you're never going to lose them. You've been their mother for years, and nothing is going to change that. I know I missed so much time with them, and I'll never get that back, but I'm not trying to take your place. I just want to be part of their lives." Anna looked down, her emotions swirling. She had spent so long fearing this moment, the fear that David would somehow take her daughters away from her. But hearing him say it out loud, that he wasn't trying to replace her, was a relief she hadn't expected. "I know you're not," she whispered, "but it still feels like everything's shifting, and I don't know how to find my footing." David hesitated, his next words filled with caution. "What if we stopped thinking of this as something that has to be either or? What if we found a way to co-parent together?" Anna looked up at him, startled by the suggestion. "Co-parent?" David nodded. "I know it's not conventional, but we both love them, and they need stability. We need to work together if they're going to heal. I'm not saying it'll be easy, but it's the only way I see forward." Anna blinked, surprised by the proposal. The idea of working together with David, of blending their lives in a way that allowed both of them to be part of the girl's future, was daunting. But it also made sense. Neither of them could do this alone, and perhaps the only way to give Olivia and Grace, Madison and Maya, the space to figure out who they were was to create a new kind of family. "Maybe you're right," Anna said, her voice soft. "I don't know how we'll make it work, but we can try." David smiled, a glimmer of hope in his eyes. "That's all I'm asking. Just try." Over the next few weeks, David and Anna began to make a plan. Slowly, carefully, they introduced a new routine for Olivia and Grace. One where both of their parents were present, where family wasn't something fractured, but something that could evolve and grow. It wasn't easy. There were still awkward moments, moments where the past weighed too heavily, where the girls seemed unsure of their place in this new arrangement. But there were also moments of progress. One evening, as the four of them sat together at Anna's dinner table, Olivia cracked a joke, and for the first time in what felt like ages, everyone laughed. Grace, who had been quiet for so long, joined in, her laughter bright and clear. It was a small thing, but to Anna and David, it felt like a breakthrough, a sign that maybe, just maybe, they were on the right path. Months later, as the seasons changed and the wounds of the past slowly began to heal, Anna found herself standing in the backyard, watching the twins, Madison and Maya, play. They were older now, wiser in ways children shouldn't have to be, but still full of life. They were laughing as they ran across the grass, their voices carried on the breeze, and for a moment, the world felt at peace. David joined her, standing by her side as they watched the girls together. "We've come a long way," he said quietly. Anna nodded, her heart swelling with a mixture of pride and gratitude. "We have." It hadn't been the family she had expected or planned for, but somehow they had found their way. David was right. This wasn't about choosing one life over another. It was about building something new, something that honored both the past and the present. As the twins laughed and played, Anna realized that this was the future she had feared for so long. The unknown, the unpredictable, but it wasn't as terrifying as she had imagined. In fact, it felt like the beginning of something beautiful. If you love gripping stories filled with suspense, unexpected twists, and emotional drama, don't miss out. Subscribe now and be the first to dive into more thrilling tales that will keep you on the edge of your seat. Join our community and never miss an exciting chapter.